Okay, so in the last class we had looked at different ways of contraception, different methods. I'm not going to revise about it now. And also we had looked at what is it mean by medical termination of pregnancy, why it is done, how it is done, and so on. And we had also quick look at the act that are being present. Now, in continuation with that, there are different terminologies or different topics which we are going to look at in the reproductive health. First being infertility. Now, always remember, we usually, there is the second point. Infertility is kind of misunderstood always with sterility. Infertility can be temporary. Sterility is usually permanent one. Like you say, a male or female is sterile. That means they will never be able to produce the children. But the moment we say a male or female is infertile, that means they may or may not produce children at this moment. That is, they can be infertile for the time being, and there are various conditions related to it. So that is inability to conceive or produce children in spite of unprotected sexual cohabitation. That means deliberately having the sexual intercourse without any contraceptives, so that the child or the baby is conceived, but not being able to do that. That is what is known as infertility. And like I said, infertility is not similar to sterility. Sterility, which is complete inability to produce children, that is permanent one. Both in males as well as females, due to various reasons, can be physical. Physical refers to some external structure having reproductive structure having problem, or not developed completely. Congenital diseases, some disorders which have been arisen since birth, certain medications or immunological and physiological processes which can lead to this infertility. In case of males, this can be of different types because of several reasons. Let's say, for example, if the semen has less sperm count, which is less than 20 million, usually it is 200 to 300 million sperm in 3 to 4 ml of semen. If it is like less than the 10% of it, that means less than 20 million cells of sperm in the ejaculate, then that is called as infertile male. That does not mean that male cannot reproduce. Obviously, if we take out certain sperms from these 20 million sperms, it can produce a child. It just that is not sufficient to make the child through normal process of reproduction. Then abnormal sperm structure, if the sperms they don't have a typical shape or typical structure whichever is present in the sperm cells, or poor sperm motility, so that they are not able to reach the uterus and then ultimately to the fallopian tube. So that way it can cause infertility. It can also be due to a concept which is called as cryptorchidism, right? That means a failure of testes to descend into the scrotum. So sometimes it happens to some of the males that what you say, the testis is ascending towards the abdominal cavity from the scrotal sac, and it doesn't descend back into the scrotum. Can be because of the temperature change, or can be because of certain muscular movements within the pelvic area. There are several reasons for that, but just that failure of testis to descend back into the scrotal sac, that is known as this cryptorchidism, and which can also lead to infertility. In a way, then there might be sometimes twist in the vas difference, or the testis doesn't have a proper temperature for the maturation of the sperms, because they are in the abdominal cavity and not in the scrotal side. So again, like there are several reasons for this that it can lead to infertility. hyperthermia, that is higher body temperature, especially in the scrotal sac. Again, scrotal sac is or hanging outside the body because of its temperature regulation activity. And if the scrotal sac itself has higher temperature, it will lead to no sperm formation, or even if the sperms are formed, they will be not completely functional. The blockage of vas deferens, that is a very physical cause, again due to various mechanisms or muscular movements within the body, could be due to certain surgical procedures and so on. Alcoholism, now alcoholism always leads to temporary infertility. Temporary as in it's like a very short lived. If it is chronic alcoholism, that is someone is drinking extensively and for long period of time, it can inhibit spermatogenesis, uh, and that is how it leads to infertility at the end. It's ultimately alcohol acts onto your cerebellum and also some parts of the brain, which are ultimately not passing down the signal to the your gonads, and that is how this spermatogenesis is inhibited. So that is a mechanism by which alcoholism creates infertility in males. Also certain infections like mumps virus after puberty, especially, that is a male has reached a puberty, let's say after 13 years of age or so, and then he gets an infection of the mumps virus. I hope you are aware of what mumps virus is. That swelling of the parotid glands, that is this neck, no, not the neck, just below the ear, and at the what you say, just below the jaw also, in the neck portion there are these parotid glands, and the swelling of this, or rather the infection of these glands, is nothing but the mumps, and that is because of certain virus. So that is the mump virus. And if that infection happens after puberty, usually this infection happens during the childhood, so none of the adults usually get it. Rarely they get it second time, or rarely they get it after the puberty. But if at all that happens, that can again lead to some sort of infertility, and this has again something to do with the immune reaction, because these parotid gland, they are involved in the immune and inflammatory reactions of the body. It acts on the gonads, and that way it creates certain problems with the sperm production and so on. So that way it can also lead to the infertility. Deficiency of gonadotropins, of course, if there are less of the hormones or less of those gonadotropin releasing hormone, any of those axial hormones can lead to infertility. Ejaculation defects, again less of semen being ejaculated, or any of such situation can lead to infertility. And exposure to radiation, again this is something extreme, like if there is extreme exposure to radiation, that it can lead to infertility in males, because those radiation, they are going to affect the spermatogenesis process and also the sperms which are produced. So that way it can create mutation and ultimately the infertility later. On contrary, not contrary, but in combination along with the male, the infertility in female can also occur due to irregular or no ovulation, and this has something to do with different physiological events, like again a commonly known uh, what do we say, disorder is PCOD, that is polycystic ovarian disease. Now in those cases also there are irregular periods or irregular menstrual cycles, or in some other cases there will be completely the ovulation will be completely stopped, and that can also lead to infertility. Defects in genital tract, like impaired motility of the fallopian tube. So if there are defects in these, any of these fallopian tube structure or cervical tube structure or even vagina structure, it can lead to impaired motility of either ova if it is fallopian tube, or of the sperm if it is cervix or vagina, and defective uterine endometrium, obviously it will not, if there are defects in the endometrium, it will not allow the ovule, not ovule, the zygote to get implanted, and so on. So that is one of the reason for infertility in females. And the last one is again the deficiency of female sex hormones, that can also lead to infertility. So these are the general reasons what can cause to infertility in males as well as in females. Any question here? Okay, so then now we have looked at the reproductive process. We have looked at the problems associated with, some of the problems associated with, especially the infertility. And now we are going to look at what are the techniques which are being used to solve these infertility problems, right? Which is known as assisted reproduction technology. So that reproduction process is assisted using certain technology. So it is also called as this ART. So this ART includes a number of special techniques which assist the infertile couples to solve their infertility problem. First being in vitro fertilization. Or in short, it is called as IVF, and because it is associated with embryo transfer, we call it IVF ET, or in other terms, we also call it test tube baby, right? So this is the technique which is again most commonly you would have heard about it. So there is fertilization of ovum with the sperm, which is carried out outside the female body in a glass container. And it's not usually always a test tube, what we know of. It can be just a simple petri plate or so on, but that way we call it test tube baby. And that's the in vitro, it usually refers to outside the body, right? That is a, I guess, Latin or Greek word. In vitro means outside. In vivo, that is VIVO. In vivo means within body. So we have in vivo processes and in vitro processes. So that way, this is in vitro fertilization. That is the fertilization is happening outside the female body. Now, how this is done? So the process for this is being mentioned in points. So first stage is superovulation is induced using drugs into the female. Now superovulation is something that more than one ovule is getting secreted by the female ovaries, and this is usually done with the help of the drugs. Drugs can be your hormone or certain molecules like progesterone, certain molecules like estrogen, which will activate more of the follicle, and it will lead to the final secondary oocyte formation, which will be separate. So that is the superovulation. So more than one ovule formation can be by single ovary or can be by both the ovaries. That is what is superovulation. And like I said, it is induced using drugs. Even if you add, let's say, follicle stimulating hormone, like to a localized injection or through a blood, that is IV injection, it can also go and act on the ovaries, which will lead to more ovule formation. So that is superovulation. Then second step is retrieval of this ovule. That means you whatever ovules are being released by the ovary, they are being retrieved before the actual ovulation. That means before the 14th day of the ovulation of the menstrual cycle. Let's say on 13th day itself, the ovules will be taken out from the ovaries, and they will be placed in a culture medium. Culture medium is usually a nutritious medium which simulate the blood plasma like situation, where it will be all factors like proteins or nutrition components like salts and so on, water, all of these will be there. Glucose, like all of it. You imagine it, whatever is present in the blood plasma, something similar in external situation. If you have to grow cells, that is called as culture medium. It's also called as nutrient culture medium at times. So these ovules, they are being placed in this culture medium, and that culture medium is kept in the incubator for 4 to 6 hours. Now, why incubator? Because body temperature is different, room temperature is different, right? So you need to keep these ovules within an incubator which is simulating the body temperature. So usually most of those cells or even the ovules, which is a cell, they will be kept at 37 degrees for 4 to 6 hours. I hope you are following all of these processes. So then the semen to be used for insemination is purified and concentrated by wash and swim up technique. Now, obviously, you ask a male person or whosoever is the partner of that female uh, to masturbate and take out the semen through ejaculation, and that semen is collected. Usually, there are quite many precautions that needs to be taken. Even that is like what we can, if we can call it like artificial masturbation, because it is done for certain purpose. So in that case, usually the first lot of the semen that is being ejaculated, that has to be collected because that contains lot of sperms, and usually the second lot of the semen within the same ejaculation, that usually has less of sperm. So all of the semen that is uh, present in one ejaculate, that has to be collected in total. Then it is washed in the sense because uh, I am assuming you are aware of there are certain proteins, I forgot the name, it is called as spermo something something. So those proteins, they will coagulate the semen after a while. So if it is outside the body, the semen will coagulate, so it will form a kind of solid paste like material. And not to let that happen, it has to be washed. So only the sperm cells, they will be distributed into sterile medium, that is sterile nutrient medium, so that the sperms get more diluted, and whatever coagulating agent is there in the semen, it is diluted, so it does not perform its function. And then you centrifuge. This centrifuge is something, are you aware of centrifuge? Anyone? What centrifuge is?
So is that the thing that spins to separate? So is it the machine that kind of spins, like rotates to separate
Correct.
different masses?
Right. So depending on the speed that you use for the centrifuge, uh, these will separate the cells and the supernatant. So now let's say we have a semen sample. We have added a fluid or nutrient medium to it, so it gets diluted, and you kind of suspend the sperm cells in whole of the medium, and then you centrifuge. So what you get at the end of centrifuge is a lump of sperm cells at the bottom, and you discard the supernatant, so which will not anymore coagulate the your whole of the sperms along with the semen. So semen is, the fluid part is totally gone, and what you get is only the sperm cells at the end. So these sperm cells, they are again separated by the swim up technique. Now swim up technique is very useful technique. Now swim up, the name itself says the sperm, they are going to swim up literally. So what you do is you add certain portion of the what you say, sterile uh, saline solution. That's where the normal saline solution is kept in a small volume where the sperms are suspended, and on top of it slowly you add the nutrient medium. Now because the sperms, they do not have much of the nutrition at the bottom layer, and these two layers, they are not mixing because they have certain different density difference. So they will not they will not mix up, but rather they will stay separate. So from this sperm layer where it is with the saline, the sperms will try to move up in that nutrient medium, and that is what is then you take out the nutrient medium, and that you use for the next processes. So that method of separating the sperms which are coming up via swim up technique, that is being used for the separation of the some sperms. About 50 to like 1,50,000 to 1 lakh functional sperms are taken, And usually you can imagine if one ejaculate has what 200 to 300 million, very small amount from that is being taken for the further processes. So that is the preparation of the ovule, preparation of the sperms. Now then this purified semen, that is whatever we get after the swim up technique, is poured over the matured oocyte. So again in the culture medium, you have the ovule, you pour slowly over the around this ovule or the mature oocyte, and it is observed under the microscope for next 12 to 24 hours after insemination, which is artificial insemination in vitro. Since the fertilization will occur inside the female body, outside the female body, it is called as in vitro fertilization. And then this fertilized egg with two pronuclei, that is you have one from male and other from female, and a polar body, these things they are being taken for the next process. So the fertilized egg, like you have poured the sperm over the ovule, now the fertilization has happened, you observed under the microscope. After the fertilization, you know that you observed under the microscope and you see that there is certain nuclear mechanisms are happening. That is when you know that egg has been fertilized. Then you incubate that fertilized egg again for 48 to 72 hours in the incubator, that is again at 37 degrees. And during this phase, the fertilized egg will undergo the cleavage that will reach up to 32 to 48 stage. No, I guess something is wrong here. 48 shouldn't be, 32 to 64 cells ideally, right? That cell stage should reach here. And then this embryo is implanted into the endometrium of the fetus. So whatever fertilized egg after the 72 hours you get, you implant it using artificial methods, like again like it is not always surgical process, it is rather through the vagina, using a catheter like stick like structure or a catheter. You insert that ovule or the fertilized egg into the uterus, especially the endometrium part, and the female has now conceived and is considered pregnant. So just the first part of fertilization is done outside the body, and the next growth from the blastocele stage, it starts happening within the uterus, and further the development of the child continues in the womb until it is born, and the baby is called as test tube baby. So that is the technique of in vitro fertilization, or also called as test tube baby. Okay, any question here in this technique?
So
Yes.
is it like safe?
Sorry, is it like?
Safe? Like will the baby, like will it have some kind of deformities or something?
No, why it should have a deformity?
I'm just asking. Maybe the environment is a bit different,
Mhm.
or will it be exactly the same?
Now you missed on one part, that we always observe the embryo throughout this 72 hours under the microscope. So we check that the blastocele like formation is happening normally. If that is happening normally, there has to be no chance until and unless it's genetic. But otherwise every other precaution is being taken care uh, to develop this embryo outside the body for the time being. Rare chance is there, and again like you know that sonography is usually done at almost every month to check the growth of the child. So if at all some defect is found within the first trimester, it is asked to terminate the pregnancy.
So can the whole like embryo be grown, like the whole child, can it be grown inside the test tube or like the artificial setup?
Not really. Means it can be done, but imagine you need to know exact amount of all those RBCs, WBCs, blood component, different growth factors, thyroid hormone, all those different components, which is like going to make a very complex system to be developed outside. If you can develop that, then it is very much possible. People have tried it, but then not to the like complete success. The best system is to implant the embryo uh, within the mother's body, and then it will take care of it automatically.
So like people don't know exactly what happens. They don't know the.
No, we know each and every process what is happening.
So like if they know, then why can't they do it? Like you said, they need to know all the enzymes and hormones that are released. And
See, I don't know if you are able to visualize this part. Like when it is a cell, it is hardly what, not even, yeah, few micrometers. That is this fertilized egg, maybe some hundreds of micrometer, right? When it grows up to, let's say, morula or blastula stage, it becomes some again few more hundreds of micrometer. Then it will reach to a millimeter stage and so on. Until then, it is easier to maintain those nutrient medium. The moment size becomes bigger, right, to have that much of nutrient medium, to have that much of all the possible solution, plus how will you create the umbilical cord, uh, which is giving all the nutrition to the fetus. The fetus will not just absorb through the skin over the time. It needs the internal circulation to be fixed with that. So until that umbilical cord like structure is being formed in the fetus, you need to take care of the whole embryo in terms of nutrition, and which is a difficult process. You can't just keep it suspended in a culture medium, or you can't even attach a tube. If you have to attach tube, how many tubes will you attach and how will you attach? Where exactly will you know? You ultimately have to do a surgery with that growing fetus, which might lead to the malformation in the developmental stages. So I hope you are understanding the complexity of the process, right? The umbilical cord is connected to the fetus and the mother's body, which is providing all the nutrition. It's like one pipeline and you get everything. That is not possible to simulate in the artificial situation.
okay,
We see it is possible. I'm not saying it is impossible to do it, but the complexity is too much that the chance of having a completely grown baby is almost like next to zero as of now. We never know, people might design something else later. So like currently what we have started doing is three-dimensional culture, which I had mentioned earlier. So something with that is kind of possible, but again that is still not completely explored. And again, like I said, these are not ethical experiments to be done, and they are not allowed to like process it further. So that's why people don't do it anymore. There are actually punishments if someone is found doing this. So that's again a critical thing. Okay, so that's the in vitro fertilization and embryo transfer method, or also called test tube baby method. Now there are various ways these similar things can be done, right? uh, One method which is called as intrauterine transfer, which will transfer the embryo in the uterus at 32 blastomere stage, which is something similar to your test tube baby. Rest of the process remain same, like you take the ovule, you take the sperms, you wash them, grow them in culture medium, allow them to fertilize, and then you transfer. So that is intrauterine transfer. Something other like the other method, that is zygote intrafallopian transfer, and this will involve the transfer of zygote or embryo at the 8 cell or 8 blastomere stage itself into the fallopian tube and not into the uterus. So not letting the what you say, the fertilized egg grow up to 48 to 72 hours, and immediately after fertilization, after the stabilizing the fertilized egg, you implant it into the fallopian tube. So that is the Zift technology. Again, depends on how like these methods, they are usually decided based on what is the condition of the mother, like in terms of the physical reproductive structures, and also the ability to conceive, the hormonal balance and so on. So there are so many factors that doctor look at to decide which technique to use. This usually needs a stronger as in the more balanced uh, body system, the zygote intrafallopian transfer. That is because it is happening at the earlier stages of the embryo development, that is immediately after fertilization. So, and this in this method, which is allowing the blastula to grow up to 32 blastomere stage, that means the embryo is made even more stable, and then it is being implanted into the uterus. So that moment of fallopian tube to uterus of the fertilizing is kind of skipped. So that these are the different methods. And just one terminology, that is surrogate mother. Again, you would know this when a help of another woman is sought to bring up the in vitro fertilized ovum to maturity, and such woman is called as surrogate mother. So I hope you understand this concept. Let's say I am married and I have a wife, and my wife is not able to conceive for some reason. So I take help of some other girl or woman to allow us to grow our baby. Again, the baby would be mine and my wife's, and just the surrogacy is done in the third woman. So that's the ideal surrogate mother case. In movies, you might have seen otherwise. In case of surrogate mother case, they also show that the actor is sleeping with some other woman. That is not actual surrogacy. That's actual sexual intercourse. That's not surrogacy at all. Yeah. So that is totally different. In this case, just the embryo is transplanted into a third woman. Okay, then there are certain drawbacks of this in vitro fertilization process. Not possible in women with damaged uterine wall. So if they have damaged uterine wall, obviously the formation of endometrium or formation of placenta and so on, or even keeping that embryo within the uterus is not going to happen. So then the in vitro fertilization cannot happen there. Very highly technical, specialized professionals are required, expensive instrumentation and the chemicals. And this is why I said earlier also, like it is little complicated process than what we imagine. Theoretically, it's very much possible. Practically, there are so many aspects that we need to take care of. One of the most important aspects when you grow something to a larger extent, when it is at a petri plate level, no, like hardly 10 ml of the nutrient medium, to keep it sterile in the sense microbe free, it's very easy. The moment you grow in terms of size, keeping it sterile is even more difficult, because you need to have completely sterile environment and so on. So that is a very difficult process. It can be availed by only selected people. Again, not everyone can access it, again because of the cost and so on. So that way, very selective people can take advantage of it. Ethical, legal problems associated with IVF, like I said, it is not really allowed to experiment with these IVF technologies because of several problems associated with it. Also, there are certain religious, moral and emotional issues associated with when you take help of someone else, or in case the donor sperms are taken, if the male sperms are not like fertile enough, then donor sperms are taken, and then that in vitro fertilization is done. But in that case, the moral issues or emotional issues, they are associated. So there are so many problems like that. Not necessarily we have to go into details of this, but yeah, just there are few drawbacks of this technique. Now there is something apart from this which is called as gift, that is gamete intrafallopian transfer. So in this case, the washed sperm, like whatever you get after that swim up technique, they are taken, and the two retrieved ova, they are transferred into the fallopian tube. So you have retrieved the ova, you have retrieved the sperms as well, and that you transfer into the fallopian tube with the help of laparoscope. Laparoscope is nothing but a kind of catheter which is attached to what you say, camera. So that is the laparoscope, and it is used when male has low sperm count. So if you remember, I earlier I mentioned that even if a male has less than 20 million sperm count, you can still isolate the sperms which are good from that 20 million, and then you implant it along with the ova into the fallopian tube, so that the fertilization will happen, and then the next course of event will follow. So that is gift. Then the another technique is intracytoplasmic sperm injection. If the sperm count is again super low, a single sperm is injected into the ovum. So you isolate few sperms. Out of this, you take single sperm, and using a micro injection technique, under the microscope, you inject the sperm into the ovum structure, and then again it will follow the course of action, that it will be allowed to grow outside, it will fertilize, it will go to certain blastocele stage, and then it can be implanted, right? So that is the these are the two different processes apart from what we have seen earlier. Again, any question here? I hope all of these techniques are very clear. Okay, so if there are no questions, then I'll move forward. So there is another technique within this art that is called as artificial insemination or intrauterine insemination. This is nothing but you take these sperms and you put them physically using some catheter into the vagina or into the uterus directly. So a technique to treat infertility by placing the sperm into vagina or cervix when a woman is ovulating. So we know 14th day. So around end of 13th day or on the 14th day, the sperms, they are placed into the female genital tract using a thin flexible catheter, and the sperms then can travel into the fallopian tubes where they can fertilize the egg. These are usually done when male has erectile dysfunction. So there are problems with the male in terms of erection, and then these techniques, they are being used. So the sperm quality is good, the number of sperm is good, but then there is no erection with the male. So in such cases, this technique is used. It's carried out with the sperm from the male partner or donor, and can be combined with the super ovulation. It can also be combined with, so you inject certain again hormones or drug molecules, so that there are more ovules being formed in the female, and then the sperms are being transferred. Donor sperms can also be used if the male partner is sterile. So if the male partner is completely fertile, then no need to use donor sperm. But if that is person is sterile, then obviously this can be done. Either has low sperm count or carries a risk of genetic disorder. In that case also, donor sperms are being used. Artificial insemination is also called intrauterine insemination, in which the sperms are introduced directly into the uterus. So in some cases, if the sperm has certain motility issue, if the sperm tail is not formed completely or so on, but the sperms are of good quality otherwise apart from the tail, then these sperms, they are directly inserted into the uterus instead of vagina or cervix. That is what is intrauterine insemination, and this is recommended when the sperms are absent or low in count, or sperms with decreased mobility. So in those cases, this artificial insemination is recommended. Okay, now the last point in when this like artificial insemination is done, and one of the important as well, is called as retrograde ejaculation. That means, like, ejaculation usually happens outside the body through the urethra or through the penis structure. Now, if it is happening inside the body itself, that means there is a mechanism by which this ejaculation happens, right? So the urinary bladder has a sphincter, and the urethra tube at the base of the penis has certain muscles which contract and relax in jerk like movement, so that the ejaculation happens. Now, in this case, the urethral opening is kind of blocked at the base of the urethra, or the bladder sphincter, which is not contracting and relaxing enough, so that the ejaculation cannot happen. And that way, the instead of ejaculate going outside the body, it goes back into the urinary bladder, and that is what is called as retrograde ejaculation. That means a backward ejaculation, where the sperm and the semen, they are released into the urinary bladder instead of through the urethra meatus structure. So in that case also, this artificial insemination is used. So in that case, what doctors usually do is they insert a small needle into the epididymis structure. They pull out the semen along with the sperm, and then that is being used for the artificial insemination. So that is one technique is used in the case of retrograde ejaculation. Retrograde ejaculation can also happen in case of certain prostate surgeries, or surgeries related to this testis and so on. So anything which has to do with the pelvic cavity, if there are certain surgeries are being done, it might lead to the loss of muscle strength at the base of urethra, and it can lead to retrograde ejaculation. In some cases, it can be reversible, but in most of the cases, this retrograde ejaculation is irreversible process. So once that retrograde ejaculation starts, it will always be retrograde. But in some cases, it is curable, but that is like very situational and depends on the person as well. The next point, when we can use artificial insemination, like I said, either there is a dysfunction of the ejaculation or erectile dysfunction, then in those cases, this artificial insemination is used. Again, in this case also, the sperms and the semen as a whole fluid is being taken out from the epididymis structure through the injection, and then it is being used for insemination. Or in case of female, if there are presence of any cervical scar tissue from the past procedures, can be related to any abnormalities of the cervix, and in that case, which may hinder the sperm's ability to enter the uterus. So in that case, the sperms are directly put into the uterus using a catheter. So these are the methods or techniques which are being used in the assisted reproduction technology. Okay, again, any question here? So I hope all these methods are clear in your head, and usually you shouldn't need to revise these processes, because these are very simpler and logical processes that are being done. Only thing that you need to be aware of, certain terminologies or the words or keywords used in these techniques. How much time do we have? 9:50. Okay, I guess we can start with the next topic, and then we will stop after this amniocentesis process. So the next topic, like again, now we had looked at different problems and the procedure which are used to tackle this infertility problem. Now the baby is growing inside the uterus of the mother, and what are the different diagnostic techniques that are being used to study this? So which is called as prenatal diagnosis. That means during the pregnancy, that is called as prenatal. Postnatal will be after the delivery. So that is prenatal and postnatal. So we are looking at the prenatal diagnosis. Now, the detection of the fetal disorder during pregnancy is nothing but the prenatal diagnosis. This is specifically done to check the health condition of the fetus, and if at all there are certain disorders during the earlier phases of pregnancy. If there are disorders found in terms of malformation of the physical development, then it is asked to terminate the pregnancy. So the prenatal diagnosis of genetic disorders due to the chromosomal abnormalities or gene defects, that is due to the genetic disorders altogether, during the intrauterine life of the fetus as early as the first trimester, that is 10 to 14 weeks of pregnancy, and can be carried out by various techniques. So these are the names of the techniques, that is amniocentesis, chorionic villi sampling. So you know what chorion is. You know there are villi structure which is holding, earlier it was holding to the uterus endometrial. So that is chorionic villi, and a sampling from that region. Percutaneous umbilical cord blood sampling. So from one of the region of the umbilical cord, the blood sampling is being taken. Ultrasonography, this you commonly know as sonography, which is a non-invasive technique, and you know it. And the fetoscopy, so that is nothing but again observation of the fetus using a camera like device. So we will see all of these one by one. Like today we are going to see only one, and then we will stop, that is amniocentesis. So in this case, the aspiration of the amniotic fluid, that means taking out the amniotic fluid from the amniotic sac around the fetus, and that is what is called as amniocentesis. And then after you take out this fluid, you analyze it for either the karyotypes of the cells which are present in the fetus, or you do different like biomolecule testing. So there are different ways to go ahead about it. But this process of taking out amniotic fluid from the amniotic sac around the fetus, that is called as amniocentesis. And the cells present in the amniotic fluid, they are then cultured and examined. Again, you separate the cells from whatever fluid you have collected, and that you put it in the culture medium, and then you observe them under the microscope. Usually done to determine the sex and the sex or abnormalities. How will you determine sex? Obviously looking at the karyotype, whether there is a presence of X chromosome, 2X chromosome or X and Y chromosome, that will define the sex of the baby. And if there are any sex of abnormalities, that means in terms of, I hope you are aware of SRY gene, that is sex determining region on the Y chromosome. And if that is absent, then what are the sexual abnormalities that leads in the developing baby, that can be determined.
Sir,
Yes.
so like all these processes, prenatal diagnostics, all are illegal.
These are diagnostic. If someone wants it, then only they are done. They are not usually done.
So, but then they can determine the sex rate.
Yeah, we can determine.
But that's not allowed.
But again, that's when I said, if you are going to determine the sex in any possible way, you always need a permission. Even for these techniques, you always need, a doctor has to justify why he has to do that, he or she has to do these experiments.
So all these, they don't normally occur. They are very rare.
Yeah, kind of. Okay, so then also to check if there are genetically controlled congenital diseases or syndromes due to, spelling mistake. So due to the chromosomal abnormalities. Again, looking at the chromosomal karyotypes, that is the structure of the chromosomes in all the 23 pairs, one can identify, okay, particular chromosome is not looking like how a human karyotype should be. Then there would be most likely some chromosomal abnormality which can lead to certain congenital disease, that is diseases since birth of the baby. Then gene related metabolic disorders, again certain genetic studies are done because most of the metabolic disorders like for example, sickle cell anemia, thalassemia. Sickle cell anemia is the RBC shape is deformed. Thalassemia is less number of hemoglobin protein. Phenylketonuria is presence of this phenyl ketone molecule into the urine and even higher in the blood. And alkaptonuria, it is again one of the molecule alkaptone, which is byproduct of the bilirubin formation, or let's say protein degradation. And if they are excess because of certain absence of certain enzyme, all these enzymes, they are associated with a particular gene. And when you do a genetic study on the genes of the baby, which are extracted from the amniocentesis process, and then you study it, you identify if the gene has certain mutation or certain changes, it will lead to the metabolic disorders which are gene related. So that's how the briefing of this study, and that is how it is done. Procedure, again for this, location of the fetus is determined by a technique called sonography, like how is the fetus growing and so on. A small amount of amniotic fluid is withdrawn from the amniotic cavity by inserting a syringe through the abdominal and uterine wall. So I guess I have a diagram here. Yeah, so you can see this syringe, vertical one, and this location of the fetus is very important, otherwise you will poke the fetus. So not to let that happen, first sonography is done to check where is the fetus, where is the most open cavity, and then the syringe is inserted with a long needle through the abdominal wall into the uterine wall, into up to it reaches this amniotic cavity, and then from there the fluid is being aspired, that is taken away, and that you put it in the centrifuge again with the culture medium. So what you get is the lump of the cell, and that you put for Petri plate, that is cell culture. You can also do DNA and chromosome analysis, or you can also do biochemical analysis using certain enzymes, right? So that is how these techniques are being done. So yeah, it contains the skin cells of the fetus, some of the skin cells of the fetus, and a number of proteins and enzymes. So whatever is present in those amniotic cavity will be taken along with all these factors, and the cells can be cultured in vitro for further examination. In vitro culture of the cells in the nutrient medium is done, and like I said, biochemical as well as the genetic analysis of these cells are being done. Again, major drawback, like Pratham pointed out, it can be used for sex determination, but if that happens, it is liable for the punishment. So usually if at all it has to be done, the consent has to be taken, for like the permission has to be taken, and then these things are being done forward. So that is the amniocentesis process. Okay, does anyone have any question here?